You've been told your whole life that thinking things through is a sign of intelligence. That's the lie. Let's start there. Overthinking isn't your mind being careful. It's your nervous system negotiating with a threat that isn't in the room. You replay the email you sent an hour ago. You rehearse a conversation that already ended. You run the same 5 outcomes of a decision you already made, as if enough mental repetition will change what already happened. And somewhere along the way, you started calling this being thorough. You didn't build that belief, it was installed. Here's the part nobody hands you directly. The loop in your head isn't trying to solve a problem, it's trying to feel safe. Those are not the same operation, even though your brain treats them as interchangeable. A problem gets solved and disappears. A threat to your sense of self doesn't disappear. It just gets rehearsed over and over because the nervous system mistakes repetition for control. You are not thinking, you are pacing, mentally pacing, the way an animal paces a cage, not because pacing gets it out, because stillness feels more dangerous than movement. And there's a second layer under that one. Most people never get told, because naming it would break the system that profits from you not knowing it. We'll get to that layer, not yet. First, sit with this. The version of you that overthinks isn't broken, it's trained. Somewhere, at some point, your environment taught you that being caught off guard was dangerous, socially, emotionally, sometimes physically. So your mind built a department whose entire job is running simulations before reality gets the chance to surprise you. That department never clocks out. It doesn't know the meeting already happened. It doesn't know the person already replied. It only knows one directive: don't get blindsided again, ever. This is where self-help culture fails you completely. It tells you to calm your mind as if the loop is a mood. It's not a mood. It's an early warning system running a wartime protocol during peacetime conditions. You cannot meditate your way out of a survival mechanism that thinks it's still protecting you from something it hasn't updated its intel on since childhood. Now, before we go further, if this is already landing somewhere specific, hit subscribe, because what comes next is the part most people flinch away from. And I want you to drop a comment, not "great video." Tell me the exact scenario your mind replays the most, the argument, the text message, the decision, name it. Because once you write it down in a comment, you've done something your looping brain has never let you do. You've closed the loop instead of running it silently for the 600th time. Now, here's the layer. Overthinking isn't a personal flaw. It's an engineered outcome of a system that needs you undecided. Think about who benefits from a version of you that can't finish a thought. Algorithms don't want you to reach a conclusion. They want you scrolling for the conclusion, because the search is the product, not the answer. Social environments don't want a version of you that trusts your own judgment on the first pass, because a person who trusts their own read doesn't need external validation, and external validation is the currency most relationships and platforms are quietly built on. Your overthinking isn't a bug in an otherwise efficient mind. It's the exact output a dopamine-driven, approval-based ecosystem is optimized to produce. A confident, decisive person is much harder to sell to. A person stuck mid-loop is easy to keep engaged, easy to keep uncertain, easy to keep coming back for one more scroll, one more opinion, one more reassurance. Here's the uncomfortable part. You've mistaken the loop for depth. You think because a thought is heavy and repetitive, it must be important. It isn't. Weight is not the same as value. A thought that returns 50 times uninvited isn't 50 times more true than a thought you had once and released. It's just louder because it's unresolved, and your brain confuses volume with significance. And there's a version of this that's even more specific than the general loop, the one that hides in relationships. You know the pattern. You meet someone new, and within weeks, something about the dynamic feels oddly comfortable, oddly familiar, even if the specifics are slightly different.
You mistake that familiarity for compatibility. It isn't. It's recognition. Your nervous system isn't saying this is safe. It's saying, I've survived this exact emotional weather pattern before. And because surviving something once got wired into your brain as evidence that you can handle it again, you rebuild the same dynamic under a different name, a different face, sometimes a completely different city, and call it learning to love better, when really you're just rerunning an old simulation with updated casting. The loop shows up in your identity too, not just in your relationships. You perform confidence in rooms where you privately doubt every word coming out of your mouth. You've done it so long the performance runs on autopilot, the tone, the posture, the calibrated eye contact, while underneath a completely separate process is quietly auditing every sentence for how it might be received, judged, misremembered later. That gap between the performance and the private audit is exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with the task in front of you and everything to do with maintaining two operating systems at once. Groups notice this gap before you do. Not consciously, nobody sits down and plots it, but socially, in aggregate, a group will register the moment you stop performing the version of yourself they've grown used to, and it will apply pressure. Subtle at first, a joke that lands slightly differently, a comment that carries a little more edge than it needs to. This isn't malice, it's a social immune response. Groups are built around a shared baseline, and anyone who grows past that baseline gets treated, briefly, like a foreign object until they either shrink back down to fit or leave the group entirely. Nobody warns you about this, because naming it out loud would require the group to admit it has a baseline in the first place. So here's where this actually gets useful. Not motivational, useful. The exit isn't stop thinking about it. That instruction has never worked for anyone, ever. Because you cannot suppress a thread your nervous system has flagged as unfinished business. Suppression doesn't close loops, it just pushes them underground, where they run quieter and cost more.
The actual mechanism is this. Give the loop a deadline and a container. Not, I'll stop thinking about this. That's vague, and your brain ignores vague instructions the same way it ignores a to-do list with no due date. Instead, name the exact decision the loop is trying to make. Put a real deadline on it, and once the deadline passes, treat any return of that thought as data, not truth. If your mind resurrects the argument from Tuesday for the 9th time, you don't fight it and you don't indulge it. You ask one question. What decision is this loop trying to force me toward? Not what happened, what decision? Loops are never actually about the past. They're rehearsals for a future choice your mind hasn't let you make consciously yet. The second you name the decision, the loop has done its job, and jobs that are done don't need to keep running. This is the part nobody in self-help gives you because it's not comforting, it's operational. Your nervous system doesn't release a loop because you feel calm. It releases a loop because it received a conclusion. Not a soothing thought, a conclusion. I already responded, I'm not responding again, is a conclusion. I hope it's fine is not. It's just a softer version of the same unfinished business dressed up as peace. You didn't choose to become someone who overthinks. Something built that architecture in you. Brick by brick, incident by incident, long before you had the vocabulary to question it. But the fact that it was built means it can be identified, and anything that can be identified can be dismantled, not through willpower, but through recognizing exactly which department in your mind is running, what outdated directive it's still executing, and handing it finally a conclusion instead of another rehearsal. You walked in believing your looping mind was proof of how seriously you take life. You're leaving with something colder and more useful. That loop was never about the situation. It was a system, installed early, running exactly as designed. And the moment you can name the mechanism, you stop being its subject and start being the one operating it.